Hey, White Bed in here. Hey, what's going on, Pete? What's happening? Talk to me. Oh, homework. Yeah, you know what? I was about to talk to my staff about this week. Sure, I'll make a video on it. Look for it. Thanks, man. Peace out. Well, Pete needs a video on homework. Let's get busy.
Welcome. In my office tonight, relaxing, not really, working, catching up, getting ready for tomorrow's staff meeting. And it's going to be a big one, talking about homework. It is something that probably drives most parents crazy, teachers, students. It's one of these things, highly, highly controversial. Not that it needs to be, but it has become that. Interesting, if we talk about homework in general, it's got a very fascinating history. What's really cool about when you look at the history of homework, you realize it ebbs and flows, just like pretty much everything in education. Even as far as 100 years ago, when you're talking about the writer of the Ladies' Home Journal, Edward Bach, he actually was one of these first person that really wanted to abolish homework. It actually started the Society for the Abolition of Homework. And by the 1930s, pretty much all of homework was banned, which is interesting because you think about now today about homework being banned, it would not probably come to fruition. What changed that? A couple of things. Typically, things that changed the urgency for homework is, interestingly enough, political. The biggest push for homework, and it's funny, when I was taking my courses to become a science teacher, they always talk about Sputnik 1. And for those of you who don't know, Sputnik 1 was the first satellite put into Earth's orbit by the Russians in 1957. And what's interesting about that whole scenario is that it put the United States in a panic mode. Like, oh my goodness, the Russians are putting satellites up into space. We're woefully behind. We need our kids to be scientists. So that's kind of where the idea of like more homework came in, the more rigor, a lot of resources were put into teaching, especially math and science teachers at the time. And so that's kind of like the impetus for a lot of technology, the STEM, so to speak, of the early 60s. So that kind of exploded at that point. Throughout the 60s and 70s, that debate kind of goes back and forth, right? So there is a point where the American Educational Research Association, they kind of talk about like, hey, if homework is crowding out the social experience, it's no good. The NEA kind of felt the same way. There's only a certain amount to what you're doing when you're up to a certain point of homework, then there's too much. And that pretty much has not changed. It's been something that's kind of been consistent throughout the 80s. Again, there was a push for more homework towards the late 80s when you get to the Cold War again. Through the 90s, homework is pushed more and more. There was really, for the first time, like, not so much the first time, but it was one of the real times that we kind of associated academic success with economic success. And this idea of like, we're only going to be economically successful if we're academically successful. And that's where you get all the big push. That's why the presidents come in, they come up with these elaborate, educational programs. They don't always work. Typically, why? Because they need to get teacher buy-in, that the president's only president for a short amount of time. Education reform takes years, decades to actually happen. So it's always kind of like this push and pull. Whoever's kind of in charge is kind of directing how education moves forward. And now we're at a front where if you speak to most parents about homework, they don't typically enjoy doing it with the students. Their kids, it's become a point where they're fighting with children. I get it all the time. Our school is built on a system of where the kids do their homework here. So we get those stories. Those parents are sick of fighting with their kids over trying to do homework. What I'm going to try and do today is give you some clarity of what homework should be. As a teacher, what you kind of really want to think through as you're planning homework. and kind of gave you some pointers of where I think a lot of teachers miss the mark when it comes to homework. And let's kind of go into it a little bit. Okay, so what does the research show? It shows a bunch of things. It's showing that the amount of time you do homework definitely correlates with achievement. But there also shows that too much homework diminishes it. There is a breaking point. The other thing is that homework is much more effective for older students than for younger students. And there also seems to be this level of homework that's optimum. Many of you have heard of Robert Marzano. He talks about the 10-minute rule, where it's 10 minutes of homework per grade level. So, for example, a 4th grader should have 40 minutes of homework. A 5th grader should have 50 minutes. A 6th grader should have an hour. So by the time they're in the senior in high school, they have roughly about 2 hours of homework a night. That seems to be the cutoff point. That seems to be the point of where after 2 hours a night, the student's really not getting a ton of benefit from it. The other thing is, and as a teacher, I don't need my student to be doing 2 hours of work in my class each night. That's not how it should be designed. In fact, we talk a little bit about what is appropriate homework. I'm going to let you know straight up, parents, teachers, administrators, if a student cannot do the work independently, that homework is not appropriate. Why? Because here's the thing. One, if a student is unable to do the homework, he or she is less likely to ask for help. They're not going to come to you and say, hey, I don't understand this. They're probably not going to do it at all. And secondly, that homework needs to be an extension of the class. Typically, when you're in a class, you're learning some definitions, you're learning some basic theories behind stuff, and then you get to practice those theories. A lot of times, the teachers, a student will go into a class, the teacher will give them a whole bunch of information, and then they go out and have to go synthesize something, they have to go create something, they have to go evaluate something. It should actually be the other way around. The hardest part, the critical thinking, the evaluation, the analyzing of stuff should be done in the presence of a teacher. So then that way, the hardest stuff, the stuff that the student really needs help with, the most critical part of learning, the teacher is present for. The homework should be an extension of that. So for example, if I show a student how to do addition, and they're doing addition, and then they show you, oh, I know how to do addition. Okay, great. Now for homework, I want you to practice this. Not like, hey, I'm going to show you how to do addition, now you go home and do this addition. It doesn't really work that way. The student will never ever feel bought into it. They'll feel that it's kind of like a busy task, and you'll get that homework back and it won't be correct. And they're thinking they're spending all this time doing this work, but it's wrong. So you always want to make sure that student can do your work independently. That is a huge, huge piece of it. So all homeworks have few of these 5 hallmarks, and if I gotta highly recommend this book by Kathy Vatterott, and I'll leave a link down below for the book. It's called Rethinking Homework, and she really does a masterful job of kind of looking through what are some of the things that make up good homework. And she came up with these 5 hallmarks of good homework, which I really I like it. I think that if every teacher kind of thought about these 5 hallmarks of doing it and making sure your homework hit them, you'd have much more success in your students doing them, and you wouldn't be spending so much time trying to get them to do it. So the first thing is, your homework needs to have some purpose. It's got to tie into the lesson. There's no point in just giving homework just for the sake of giving homework. The kid's going to see through it. They're going to see that it's busy work. They're going to see it has nothing to do with the lesson. So it has to be something that ties into the lesson. Now, it could be 2 things. One of the things, I'm a science teacher, so one of the things I love to do is if I do a lab, then the lab report becomes the homework. So actually the hardest work was all done in the class, and they're summarizing that at home. Or like I said, you show them how to do a math problem, they do a few, and then they do more practice problems. So for example, you're reading a story. One of the things, English teachers, have the student sit with you, you're analyzing the characters, you're going deep, you're having these huge conversations, going deep into the character. Then for homework, they just read some more. It should not be where you're doing the reading in classroom and then they have to go do the hard part outside. They should be doing the hard part inside the classroom with you, supporting them, giving them structures, and then what they do before class is they read the next chapter, so that when they come in, they're ready to prepare. They're prepared to have the discussion about that that specific content for the day. Same thing, maybe have them watch a video before the lesson. Maybe read the book, the next chapter of the book, the textbook before they come to class. And so they come to class with questions. So that's the kind of stuff, very low stakes, very simple. Kids can read the books, they can definitely read prior, and it kind of gets their thinking jump started so that when they come to the class, like, oh, it's not the first time that they've heard it. So one of those things, always have purpose for your homework. Second thing, efficiency. It's got to be efficient. It's got to be quick, like something they can do. Writing a diary entry as if they were living in the same time period for history. Social media pages for historical figures. Making a game, making a video. Things that you know that can A, demonstrate that they understand the material, and two, that are very doable. Like for some students, this is fun stuff. Like try and make it so that the students enjoy what they're doing. Ownership. They gotta choose. When I always tell my teachers, let the student choose what they want to research, what country, what element, what historical figure, what book do you want to read. You're more likely to get the student to do it is if they own it. They have to have a part of the process, be part of the process as far as picking it out, like choosing the assignment. Competence. And this is what I mean. The students must feel like they can do the work alone. They're more likely to be discouraged from homework if they have to ask for help. It's very simple that, we're all kind of one of these we're all beings that always want to be right. And sometimes it's hard to ask for help, and especially if you're a student and you have multiple assignments, you don't want to keep going around and asking people, oh, I need help, I don't understand this, to the point where now you feel, like you're inadequate, so you don't even ask. The student must be able to do the homework alone. Parents will thank you for that. Trust me, I'm a parent. I've sat there and tried to figure out some of these questions. It's extremely difficult for when I have a parent that wants, or I have a parent that comes to me and says, I can't answer the question, and I look at it and I'm like, I can't even answer the question. So that's kind of that becomes problematic. If you're sending home work that the student is incapable of doing, that is a problem. How do we differentiate homework? All right, here's a good way. Time-based as opposed to task-based. I just want you to work on this many problems for 30 minutes, as many as you can get. If you want to do more, that's fine, but all I'm asking you to do is to work for 30 minutes and do this. That is really appropriate for a lot of students. There's a lot of students you'll probably might get them to do actually more than the 30 minutes, but you're just saying, all I need from you is do this 30 minutes, work on this task for a specific amount of time, as opposed to, I need you to get all 30 problems done. That's overwhelming. And you might not get one problem because they're completely overwhelmed. But if you just say, hey, I just need you to work for 30 minutes, as hard as you can, as best you can, you got questions, write them down, that's how you want to approach it. And asking reflective questions. Oh, what about that character? Where did they show integrity? How do you know they showed integrity? What did they do? So those are some of the things that they're layup questions. You can't really get them wrong. A lot of those questions really will build confidence in the students. If they know that that's a question that they can answer, I'm going for it. So those are kind of some of the things that you want to be as far as competence when it comes. And then the final is your aesthetic appeal. Like, this thing needs to look good. Kids are smart, man. They get it. They're looking at, tons of things on social media. They want it to look a certain way. Your homework should look a certain way. It should appear easy, uncluttered, places for them to write, scratch, those kind of things. Make it really, really nice. Those are really the 5 basic hallmarks of good homework. If you're hitting all of those, you're really killing it. But even just hitting several of them will really, really make a difference. The other thing I kind of want to bring up is this whole idea, and I kind of mentioned it a little bit, and there's another book by Jonathan Bergman, which I really love. If you get a chance, I'll put that link in there too. It's called Flipping the Learning. And this is that idea of flipping Bloom's taxonomy, where the most difficult parts of the lesson are done in the classroom. The evaluating, the creating, the analyzing is all done under the auspices of the teacher. And then for homework, they're either doing the vocabulary, they're filling in the blanks, they're bringing in the pieces of the lesson they had already learned prior. That's flipped learning. I like that idea. I think much more teachers need to kind of adapt that when it comes to homework. You'll be in much better shape, because I think your students will be much more prepared if you're giving them the material ahead of time. If what you're doing is really introducing the material pretty deeply, and then they're going at home and filling in the blanks for homework. Those are really good strategies as far as how you can get your students to really understand the material and be able to support them when the heavy stuff comes in, because that's kind of like the thing with a lot of students is they do not know how to analyze, they do not know how to synthesize any sort of development from a character, or come up with observations or conclusions for experiments and labs. These are things that they might need support on. It's not something you just want to leave for them. Hey, go come up with a conclusion for this experiment on your own. No, you should be able to do that, and they're doing all the background work for you prior to class. So really like Flip Learning. If you get a chance, check it out. Okay, and finally, really, as a parent, I understand homework. It's a drag, but I also understand as a teacher how important it really is to continue that learning, to have the student experience it. The other thing is and this is kind of a harder thing for most people to grasp, is that you're trying to build up the executive functioning skills in your child as far as it comes when they need to be able to do the work on their own. We're all, if you're an adult, you go to a job, your boss asks you to do something, you go home, you might have to do a report or whatever. We're built in, we're adults, we understand what homework is, we understand that that's sometimes where you're going to go to your job and then have to take some of that home and do some of that at home. We're a society where most people don't get to leave their jobs at home. You're checking your emails, especially if you're have a lot of people that you supervise, you're constantly in contact with those. So we as society have kind of made a system where it is important to be able to have these skills outside of your job. In fact, it makes you a very valuable employee if you can do some of these things outside of the typical 9 to 5. I know as an assistant principal, I'm always working. I mean, all the time, 7 days a week, all the time I got my phone on, I'm checking emails. That's just a part of the business, but that's my homework. And that's a skill that I probably fought tooth and nail when I was a student. But now it's a skill that really actually propels my career. If I wasn't able to do some of the stuff at home, I probably would be struggling with most days. So building up the executive functioning skills, being responsible, being an advocate, these are all skills that you're kind of building as early as first grade. I mean, it is crazy. My son, he's coming home second grade. He's got, a good half an hour of homework. And, do I always agree with it? Yeah, not really. But you know what? I think that one, it's a good place for him to kind of really get into the material a lot deeper, and that is really what you're trying to do as a teacher. You're trying to give them an opportunity to look at that material in a different way, in a way they can do it individually, independently, a way they can own it. Homework is one of those things that, I don't know if it'll ever be perfect in a perfect world, but it is something that most teachers find really important to as far as their students' success. And the research does show that if you're able to do some homework outside of school, if you're able to use those couple of hours a day and really go deeper into your material, remember the material, restore that material, kind of make it so that it's part of your memory, your long-term memory. So I hope this helps you all. Homework is one of those things, necessary evil. I don't know if it's evil. I think it's something that could be a really good experience for kids if it's done the right way. My daughter loves doing homework. My daughter loves coming home, reading her books. There's some aspects of homework she doesn't like, but she's bought into the fact that it is something that's a part of her day. The other thing, as a parent, you want to make sure that the routine is built in. I try and tell the parents, if you want to always make sure that when homework is being done, it's always kind of being done at a certain time, certain place, that it's, you want to make it as much of a routine as possible. You don't want it to be this thing that it's like, oh, we get to do homework here, we get to do homework here. Try and make sure that, okay, come home from school, here's a snack, here's your homework, let's get it done before home, before dinner, whatever your routine is, whether it's after dinner, before dinner. But that routine must exist, not only for you, but for the student, so that you know, like, all right, and between these hours, this is when homework gets done. Why? Because the other piece is that when they're not doing homework, the socialization time, the family time, they're just as important as homework. So it's important that you carve out the time for homework, and then when that time is done, you get to the other stuff. You get to being a family. You get to, get to play, go do those things. That's what's part about being a child, and just like not getting caught up in work. That's not what homework is supposed to be. It's not supposed to be you go to school all day, and then you come home and you do homework all night. That's not what I would want for any student. And I'm pretty sure most teachers don't feel like they need to torture a student like that and make them do homework all night. It should be something that they enjoy doing, or at the very least feel something they're empowered to do. Okay, so I hope all this makes sense. A little bit of a rambling. I'm going to edit this down a little bit. But leave questions, comments. Feel free to let me know. Cries of outrage. Any tips that you have for homework. What do you think works for homework? All of that stuff definitely is helpful. It should be shared. Get that out there. And listen, smash the like button, subscribe, and peace out.